Imagine a land made fertile by the blood of a king. This is no cheap legend. When crop failure strikes, the king is no ruler. He is an offering to a hungry earth. And that night? It rained blood, it was believed, to save the kingdom. The question is, did they really do it? Were kings ever tied and slaughtered like sacrificial animals? Several ancient texts provide clues. And every clue points to one terrifying truth. This is a story never taught in schools. Because if it's true, the blood of kings once flowed on England's stone altars. Are you ready to hear this gruesome ritual? We begin in the so-called Iron Age. Ancient peoples lived close to the earth. And they believed the earth was hungry. When crops failed, they had to feed the earth. Not wheat, not sheep. But something more precious. Human blood, the blood of a king. Some ancient poems say, the king must die so that the people may live. And behind this poem lies a terrible belief. If the king failed to bring fertility, then he would have to pay with his life. Imagine a ruler chained to a stone altar. A bonfire blazed, the clanging of swords could be heard in the distance. Druid priests held daggers, their faces hidden by wooden masks. And the people watched silently. Because to them, this wasn't murder. This was sacrifice for life. And that night, the sky was dark, with only the moon as witness. Whispers of incantations filled the air. The king's hands trembled, he knew there was no turning back. Because in the eyes of the people, he was the chosen victim. And if his blood flowed, the earth would become fertile again. Is this just a folk tale? Or did it really happen? Some evidence suggests a surprising clue. Archaeologists have discovered ancient graves, with strange wounds. Unnatural wounds, like a ritual. And these aren't just one or two bodies, but dozens, buried with signs of sacrifice, near the site of Stonehenge and other sacred sites. Why so many bodies with the same death pattern? Were they prisoners of war? Or a king whose fertility failed? Experts are beginning to suspect this wasn't a war. This was a deliberate ritual. And the deeper we dig, the more horrors are revealed. Because this ritual may be more real than we thought. Ancient texts are beginning to provide clues. Clues we'll explore in the next chapter. A chapter that will give you chills. Because this secret has been hidden for thousands of years. And now, it's time for us to unpack everything. Get ready. Because we're about to get to the heart of this death ritual. A number of ancient records provide clues about this ritual. Not from folk tales, but from texts written hundreds of years ago. One of them comes from the Historia Regum Britanniae, a book that records the legends of the kings of Britain. In it is tucked away the story of a king who died for the land. There are no clear details, just symbols, cryptic sentences. But the meaning is enough to send shivers down your spine. If the earth refuses its harvest, the blood of the ruler must flow. A sentence, considered an ancient oath. And this sentence appears in more than one manuscript. Even in ancient Irish poetry, the Rigfine sacrifice is mentioned. It means the king must die for the people. Is this just a metaphor? Or was it actually done? Historians are divided. Some say it was just a symbol of power. But others believe this was a real ritual. A ritual performed when the harvest failed, and the people were about to starve to death. Imagine that scene. It hadn't rained for months. The ground cracked, the rivers dried up, the children cried from hunger. The king stood before his people, blamed for this curse. Because in those days, the king wasn't just a leader. He is the representative of the gods on earth. If the earth is angry, then the one who must atone is the representative of the gods themselves. And that was the beginning of this terrible sacrifice. Some ancient Irish manuscripts describe it even more clearly. The king was bathed in the river, clothed in a white robe, surrounded by priests and praying people. Then, he was led to the stone altar. His hands were tied, a sword was placed on his chest. And accompanied by a spell, his head was cut off. His blood was allowed to flow into the ground, believed to fertilize the earth. The body parts were sometimes burned as offerings. This is not just a story, because archaeological evidence confirms this suggestion. At an ancient ritual site, mutilated bones were found. The cut marks were neat, as if done deliberately. And these victims were no ordinary people. Some were found with jewelry, weapons, even crowns. Is this proof that kings were actually sacrificed? Archaeologists are still debating. But the more evidence is found, the stronger the likelihood that it is true. And if true, this ritual was not performed once, but repeatedly over the centuries. And now, we come to the most terrifying chapter, the concrete evidence. The truth isn't always stored in books. Sometimes it's buried deep underground. And that's where archaeologists find it. In the English peat bogs, ancient bodies are found. They're called bog bodies. Corpses preserved for thousands of years look like they died yesterday. Their skin is still intact, despite being 2 millennia old. And their wounds speak volumes. Some throats were slit with precision. Others had their skulls smashed with a blunt object. Then their stomachs were slashed, before they were finally thrown into the bog. This is no ordinary death. This is an execution, a ritual, a sacrifice. And surprisingly, some of these bodies were symbols of power. Bronze necklaces, gold belts, even luxurious woolen robes. Things that ordinary people could never have owned. Who were they really? The most terrifying theory, they were nobles, even kings. Kings who failed to bring rain were then used as sacrifices. Not only in England, but also in Ireland, Scotland, and even Northern Europe. A similar pattern. Crop failure, followed by the death of a leader. And each death is full of symbolism. Heads were severed, blood was poured onto the ground. The flesh is burned, the ashes are scattered in the fields. This ritual is more than just violence. It's a belief, deeply rooted. They believe the earth is a living being. And like other creatures, it needs to feed. If the earth is hungry, it will devour the crops. And to stop it, there must be a sacrifice. Who better than the person in charge? The king. A ruler who is considered married to the land. If the land is sick, then the bride must die. A concept that appears in many European mythologies. And Stonehenge perhaps bears witness to all this. Because near the stone circle, human bones were found. Bones with neat cut marks. Rope marks on the wrists. As if someone had been tied there. Imagine that night? Bonfires, spells, blood flowing on the stone altar. And the English sky bears silent witness. The next chapter will take us to the heart of this mystery, Stonehenge. Stonehenge, a giant stone monument that remains a mystery. Many think it's just an ancient solar calendar. But what if this place was once a sacrificial altar? Some archaeologists believe this stone circle is more than just a symbol. It was a ritual stage where blood once flowed. Around Stonehenge, human bone remains were found. Not one, but dozens. Most show unusual signs of death. Cut marks on the neck, ligature marks on the hands. And the strange positioning of the bodies, as if arranged for a ritual. In one excavation, parallel pits were found. Like a wooden pole used to tie a victim. Is this evidence of a sacrificial altar? No one dares to be sure. But imagine, winter night, full moon hanging in the sky. The king stood in the center of the stone circle. His white robe billowing in the wind. The priests stood around, their faces hidden behind wooden masks. The king's hands were tied with hemp rope. The sound of the drums started beating, getting louder. Mantras were chanted, in a now dead language. The campfire is burning, the shadows are dancing on the stone walls. And then, the sword was raised high. The king looked up at the sky. His eyes were wet. He knew his blood would be a gift to the earth. The sword descended, fast and cold. Blood splashed onto the ground, wetting the frozen grass. Shouts of victory, mixed with sobs. Because for them, this wasn't death. This was the rebirth of fertility. Is this just our imagination? Or did it actually happen in England? A lot of evidence points to it. Ancient texts, poetry, and archaeology all share the same pattern. Human sacrifice, when crops fail. And the victims weren't ordinary people. But those who led. Kings, rulers, perhaps even gods living in the eyes of the people. And Stonehenge may be a silent witness to that blood. Every stone may have absorbed the blood of sacrifices. And every time you stand there, imagine how many died beneath your feet. Do you still want to visit Stonehenge? Or will you hear the whispers of the victims behind the stones? Because legend says, their spirits still roam there. And they await the next king. Among all the stories, one name is always mentioned. Domhnall, the Irish king who was said to have died as a sacrifice. Ancient records tell that at that time the crops failed for 3 years in a row. The people were starving, children were dying in the streets. The priest said, "This is the curse of the earth." And the only way to atone for it was with a king's sacrifice. Domhnall tried to fight. He sent troops to find the cause of the disaster. But every day, the sky remained empty. Until finally, he resigned himself to fate. On the eve of Samhain, he walked alone to the stone altar. There, the priests were waiting for him. He took off his crown, placed it on the ground. "If this is the way to save my people, do it." There was no fear on his face, only resignation. The sacred sword was raised high, then came down quickly. Domhnall's head fell. His blood soaked the altar. And strangely, after that night, the first rain fell. Was this a coincidence? Or proof that sacrifice really works? No one knows. But this ritual stopped after the new religion arrived. However, this story never really disappeared. Because every time the harvest failed, the people whispered about the king who must die. Because power always comes with sacrifice. And the question is, who will be the next victim? Maybe not a king, maybe someone you know. So, do you believe kings were slaughtered to make England fertile? Or is this just a story invented to scare people? The facts we have discovered are too many to ignore. And this mystery may never be fully answered. But remember, every time you step on Stonehenge, you may be standing on the grave of a sacrificed king.